studio now. Don Pannell from John L. Scott here in Shelton. Some Riveting Radio Real Estate. Morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm feeling riveting.
Good, good.
Nice.
Now, we may, despite my toughest tests, get through 2 letters today on the
Shut up.
alphabet. I think we
I
may.
think that's that because they're kind
Fingers
of
crossed.
they're kind of not a whole lot of discussion can
Throw a
happen.
Right.
monkey-
They
throw a
kind of
monkey
are what they
wrench
are.
into this. All right,
They
so
are
we're at
what-
letter Q.
Q. Yes, and
And we guessed, I guessed qualified.
And I
what
said
did you
quota.
Say? Quota.
I don't know.
it is not either one of those.
Okay, what do we got?
It is quitclaim deed.
Oh.
And these are, you see these every once in a while. I've actually done a couple of these. The caveat is that, yes, it's cheaper because you're not having to go through the whole title search and all that kind of stuff. But the bad news is that you also don't have that protection.
Oh.
So the quitclaim is only from that point in time forward. So you have no idea if there are past liens on the property or if there's a title problem or anything
Oh.
like that. So in very, very rare cases, it makes sense if it's like vacant land and you've known the people that owned it for 50 years
Right.
and that kind of thing. Then you can save some money.
But for a home, it could be
A
risky,
home, it could be
probably.
really, really risky.
Yeah.
Because again, you have no idea. I mean, somebody there could be a money owed from 50 years ago, and you wouldn't have any way of knowing until they come to collect it.
Oh, wow.
And you're on the hook for it because you don't have that insurance of the title policy. That's what you're paying for when you get that title insurance from the seller is that
I
assurance.
suppose if it was cheap enough, you'd be okay with it.
Well,
but
And
that
a lot of
sounds risky.
people think too that there's no money involved. Well, that's
Right.
not true. You still have to pay the excise tax, and you have to pay the transfer fees, and you have to pay the recording fees. So there are still fees involved, and then you have to go to get the correct forms. So there's a little bit of work involved in it. So it's not the sort of you're not just signing your name on a piece of paper and all of a sudden it's yours.
Probably not
There-
the best way to go.
I try not to recommend it, like I say, unless there's extenuating circumstances where you absolutely positively know the history of this property.
Right.
Then perhaps it's a good idea, but not usually.
How many of these are around the area? Quick claims. I mean, if someone's looking, or they come up on searches and things like
They'll
that.
come up on a title search, yeah, but you have to know what you're looking for.
Okay.
So usually there's a something in when you look at the title that indicates that it is this. But again, you're kind of on your own, making sure that you're covered.
Okay.
So I would prefer to steer people into the direction of going through a title company and getting that added assurance
Sure.
that
Right.
you're buying. It's
Right.
a big purchase, even if it's just a piece of vacant land. It's still a fairly sizable purchase
Right.
for most people. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you're as well protected as you possibly can be.
Yeah.
And quitclaim isn't. A lot of times you'll see them too, like from one spouse to another.
Oh.
So in that case, perhaps it makes sense because you're not actually selling the property. You're just gifting it from one spouse to another or to kids or something like that.
Right.
So, in that regard. But again, you still have to pay the recording fees. You have to file it with the county. You have to do the proper paperwork. So, it's not, again, not as easy as just signing your name on a piece of paper.
Sure.
So be aware of that.
So that's the quick claim.
That's the Q. That's the Q.
All right,
So,
then.
Yeah. So, and then R is also kind of a fairly cut and dried one. Not much discussion. It stands for real estate owned property, and that's the REO that you see sometimes
Oh,
in,
yeah,
in
I've
listings.
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always think of REO Speedwagon,
Me
but
too.
that probably dates me. But REO is where the property has gone through foreclosure. So it's not the same as foreclosure. Foreclosure is the first step. So the bank has foreclosed on the property. Then typically, if they don't sell it as a foreclosed property, then they'll put it at auction. If it doesn't sell at auction, then it becomes an REO, which means that the bank now actually owns it.
Okay.
Yeah, and when it's in foreclosure, the seller still owns it. The bank has a financial interest in it, but the seller still owns the property. And same for auction. They've kind of gone through that whole process.
Now
And then-
about the auction, I'm sitting here thinking of like, the auctioneer guy going,
Right.
do they actually show up to the house and there's an auction,
courthouse
or
steps?
do
Usually
you
it's
just
at the courthouse
send-
steps.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and it actually literally is,
It is.
on the steps of the courthouse. I
I'll
was
be
I was
darned.
going into the courthouse the other day, and there's all these people milling around outside. And I went, "Oh, we're here for a courthouse steps auction." So yeah.
And they give them little paddles and. Or,
Well, I'm not sure but they
Okay.
they somehow they
Yeah.
did. A lot of times they
Interesting.
require cash,
Okay.
and you have to prove that you have a certain amount of cash before they'll even let you bid. And then then they do the transfer of
Interesting.
the deed, and then you actually own it. The problem with them is that again you have no assurances of. A lot of times you haven't had a chance to do any kind of an inspection. Sometimes you haven't even seen the property.
Wow.
So
Like Storage Wars or whatever.
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, or flip or
Interesting.
flop.
Right.
They go in and
Interesting.
I've never actually seen this property. Oh, okay.
What would get a house, or how could a house get all the way to the bank owned, the real estate owned? I mean, if you're selling it and it's not selling, or if it goes under foreclosure and nothing happens there,
Yeah.
and then you go through the auction, no one buys it at the auction. What is the? It doesn't sound like it's going to be a super
Yeah,
good
what's the
property.
bank
No,
gonna do?
it makes you wonder, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah, and that's why I always, every time I see that REO classification, it's like, oh, okay. There's a variety of reasons. I mean, it could be location, it could be, the condition that the house is in. There's a number of reasons why a place doesn't sell. But you're right. If it's gone through that whole process and it still hasn't sold, then, where are we? And what we run in sometimes too, where it's getting better, but a lot of times banks would hold on to these properties for years sometimes. And so then they're just sitting there empty, and that's not good for any house.
Yeah.
And so by the time they actually hit the market, I went in one time, and there were literally mushrooms growing in the,
Oh,
in the
my
carpeting.
Oh
Goodness.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so then,
Because that bank's trying to get what they need. out of
right,
it,
exactly. And so they're
Right.
thinking that as they hold on to it, and this was true again more a couple years ago because things were increasing in value, so they're not doing that as much.
Right.
But you can kind of understand their point of view too. They want to recoup their investment, but boy, sometimes they can just be.
Yeah.
You're better off just tearing them down.
So is this, when it comes to this, if I'm going to buy one of these, is it a cash deal, or is it make it more difficult to get a loan if it's one of these?
Yes, it makes it very difficult because they have to be in a certain condition before a bank is gonna loan you money on them.
And an appraiser or the inspector has to do a walkthrough and sign off on this thing before the lending institution feels
Right.
comfortable giving you that money?
Yeah, sometimes we'll see these listings, and there'll be an actual list of the things that they've already determined are wrong with this house.
Sure.
So, and a lot of times too, they won't, like, the water has been turned off and they won't turn it back on. So, you're kind of
Stuck?
you could turn the water on and all of a sudden have all the pipes in the house
Oh,
be
my.
broken. You don't know. So, and the VO furnaces, that kind of thing, they're not providing any assurances
Right.
that any.
That
so,
seems very risky.
yeah. I don't think.
And
I
maybe
but,
it's more for the land sometimes.
and sometimes it
that-
is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is.
They're
Yeah.
going to tear that house down anyway.
Right.
So,
Right. And
Wow.
there are people who just love doing these things. I don't think I
know
would
it.
have the temperament to do it. But,
Right.
but there are people who, and fortunately for the banks, I mean, you have to kind of sympathize with the bank's position a little bit too.
Yeah.
That they didn't really ask for this back.
Sure.
I mean, it just sort of happened that way.
Right.
And and sometimes you can get a good deal if you're willing to take the risk and put the elbow grease and the money into it. You can turn it around and have it be a really good thing. You just have to be real cautious.
So if somebody was going to buy a place like this and tear it down, I've always heard that you have to have it like one wall. of the original structure
Right.
and then it's not a rebuild, or it's a rebuild but not a brand new build.
a
Is that-
remodel. It's a
It's a
remodel,
remodel.
Oh,
Is that
you're
true?
kidding.
I have heard that too, and I believe
Wow.
that is the case. Each county is, of course, going to have its own regulations. So, I guess it just depends on where you are. But yeah, I even saw one time where they had one wall standing and they called it a remodel, and then oops, that wall fell down.
While we were remodeling.
While we were remodeling, that wall fell down. So does it still classify as a
funny.
remodel? I
Well,
don't know.
When Stephanie and I went on our honeymoon to Greece over there's a deal that if the house is still under construction, they don't have to pay the taxes on it or something. So you get rebar, a beautiful home, and then there's one section of rebar sticking out.
Oh
and they go,
my
oh well,
goodness.
we're still working on
We're
it.
still working on it, right?
And so that's
There's
what
a way to
it's
get
a lot
around
of
stuff.
those.
Yeah.
People
It's
figure those
interesting.
things out.
They
Yeah, they
do,
really
don't
do. They really do.
That's
Yeah.
sneaky.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So that's why we always say that investing in real estate is not for the faint of heart.
No,
because
no.
That's true.
there are a lot of ups and downs and ins and outs and things, which again is why I always recommend paying for that home inspection, paying for that title policy,
And having a person like you, a realtor, that can navigate.
yeah.
that.
Exactly.
And answer all the questions that,
Yeah.
lay people don't know.
because they
Yeah.
always do come up.
Yeah.
That's why it's a all of the classes and
Because
stuff that
I
we
was
take.
always curious about the auction thing too.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And so you just
Yeah.
explained that.
Yeah.
That's like so.
Yeah.
Because I did. I was like, is there like a bidder, like when they're bidding, cattle or something?
Usually
like,
it's
hey,
usually it's online.
Okay.
So, and a lot of times too, folks will come in to our office and want us to do that for them. Well, we can't.
Oh.
They actually we can advise them and kind of walk them through the process, but ultimately, they are responsible for going online, making that bid, and either getting it or not. But it's up to them. It's not up to a real estate agent.
Do you get emails that the auction is today or coming up this Friday or something?
Sometimes we do, yeah. Not always, but sometimes. And sometimes there are properties actually listed on the MLS that are auction properties, and so they'll tell you, okay, we're taking bids at such and
On
such a
this
date.
day.
This is
Yes.
this is the minimum bid.
Yeah.
This is
Because I've seen those on,
Mhm.
and it'll say on this day it will be auctioned off for
Yeah.
starting at this.
Right.
And this is, and then underneath that it'll say this is what they want.
Right.
The bank wants.
Right.
So.
right.
Does the bids, do they normally come in under, than kind of the requested amount from the bank?
That depends. Yeah, it's kind of all over the board. It just depends on how many people want it.
And if people have gone and looked at it, maybe they
Right.
have a little more.
Right.
I give you $100.
Yeah, right. Yeah, or
200.
pay me to take it away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, it just depends. There have been some really, really nice houses that have ended up going to auction for one reason or another.
Right.
I don't really know all of the ins and outs, but yeah, some really, really nice places. So, if you're willing to take that risk and have the cash to invest, you can.
And there's people out, that's all they do.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Flipping.
Yeah.
That's it.
Flipping.
That's the job. Huh.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys have a grand reopening coming up soon.
We do a ribbon cutting
Yeah.
on September 20th, I believe
Very
it is.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, the building looks great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're painting inside and we've rearranged some of the furniture and that kind of stuff. But
What a
yeah,
great office.
I think they've done a great job.
And how can folks visit or get in touch with you?
They can come and see me on the corner of 3rd and Railroad or leave a message and I will get back to them. Or they can call me at 360-490-4493 and I'd be happy to help you.
Very nice.
Good to see you, Don.
Good to see
Always
you.
good to see
Have a
you.
great weekend.
Happy Friday.
Happy
Yay.
Friday.